is crazy. But we're back on my bedroom floor, just a new angle. Because I've got a pile of towels that I need to fold and put away, but I thought while I was sitting here doing nothing else with my time, I could talk to you about the first 2 books that I have read this year. The very first book that I finished was Little Women by Louisa May Alcott. It was our family book club pick of, I guess, December/January. We kind of do one every 2 months. Like, we sat down, we had our book club meeting yesterday, which was Saturday, and talked about it, and we read 6 books in 2024, which does about equate to like a month, 2 months per book, which is good. But Little Women was my sister-in-law's pick, which is very exciting. And also, she has started her own YouTube channel, which is very exciting. I will link her down below. Her YouTube channel is called Rachel's Cozy Corner, and there are a couple other channels with that same name. So I will make sure I actually put hers down there so you know which one she is. I love her. She's adorable. I'm very excited. She just started. She's only got 2 books. It is a book channel. Maybe she'll do more in the future. I don't know. My channel's all over the place. But check her out. Give her some love. Tell her I sent you if you are so inclined. But she has 2 videos out right now. Her favorite books of 2024 and her January TBR. So I love that. I'm very excited for her. She had no idea that I had a channel, that I've had one. None of my family has known that I've had a channel for the last couple years. I just never talked about it. I didn't want my family to feel obligated, like they had to watch or, support my channel or whatever. Plus, my content is all over the place. I do books, I do cross stitch, like I've done planning videos, I did my advent calendars. It's all over the place, and I didn't want my family, like I said, to feel like they had to watch my stuff. But I just love that we both have one. She and I love books. We love puzzles. Anyways. So that was her pick of the year. And I gave it a 3. I was the lowest rating. Everyone else gave it like a 4, 4.5, almost 5 stars. I was kind of the standalone, and that's okay. That is perfectly okay. But we are following the 4 March sisters from like teen adolescence all the way into adulthood and their various lives and where it takes them. It is a classic novel for a reason, and I totally understand like how it has stood the test of time, and is so beloved to this day. So many people it's their favorite classic novel. They read it all the time, and that's wonderful. It is not mine, and okay. I gave it a 3. I really enjoyed part 1. Part 2 to me felt rushed and almost sloppy compared to part 1. Part 1 was so detailed and so thought out, and we got all of this information. And then part 2, to me, just felt rushed. Like we quickly threw together the rest of Meg's storyline and what's her face, the youngest sister. Anne? That doesn't seem right. The youngest sister and then Joe's relationship with Lori and their dynamic is a large part of the second part. And their friendship and how that changes over time. But it did just really, really feel rushed. And I think that has a lot to do with the fact that it was originally published in 2 parts as 2 separate books a long time ago, back in the 1800s, because she wrote part 1 as a standalone novel, published it, and semi-autobiographical. Everyone loved it. They wanted more. So then she very quickly wrote part 2, the second book. And I think you can tell she wrote it really, really quickly to then get it out to the masses. So for that reason, it was a 3-star for me. I'm glad I read it. I do want to watch some of the film adaptations. I know that there are multiple. There's even been like a TV show. My mother-in-law has seen all of them, and she gave us her ratings, and I love that. I think I should include a screenshot of her ratings of all of them, because that's awesome. And but she did, and I think I want to watch a couple. I think I'll just watch the most recent release, the one that came out in 2019, that stars Emma Watson, Florence Pugh, and I can see all of their faces. Saoirse Ronan or whatever, and then who played Beth? I don't remember. But I think I'm gonna watch that one. I think that'll be fun. I'm trying to do, if there are adaptations of the books that I read this year, I think I want to watch them after I have read the books. So I love that I said I was going to talk about the books I read, and now I'm just kind of rambling about other things. But that was book one. The second book that I read this year is, of course, The Wide Window by Lemony Snicket. It is book 3 in the series of Unfortunate Events books, and this one is following the siblings as they go to live with their distant Aunt Josephine on Lake Lachrymose, and she is a agoraphobic woman whose only love in life is grammar. She lives by herself at the top of a cliff, and is very sad and scared of everything, especially because her husband died not too long ago, but he passed away due to the leeches that are in the lake. And of course, mischief and mayhem and sadness ensue for the children, the Baudelaires, as Count Olaf is still pursuing them to the end of time to get his hands on their fortune. It's short, it's sweet, it's like 100 and something pages, and I gave it a 4. I should ask Caden what he has thought of the series so far. I'll do that in a different clip, because I finished my towels. I will ask him to share his thoughts, because he is also reading a series of Unfortunate Events this year, and he is blazing through them. He's read the first 5 already. So I'm gonna have to ask him to come up here and share his thoughts, because he is reading them, and share maybe his reading goal, because he also has a reading goal for himself this year, and I love it, and it's adorable, and I like that we are reading the same series so we can talk about them together. I said I gave it a 4. Well, if I didn't, I did now. I gave it a 4, and yes, I will be reading the 4th book very soon. That is The Miserable Mill. That's all I've got. What is happening? I'm halfway through this book. Hi, Washington. What is going on? I don't get it. I just want to give a quick update over some of my reading, because I have finished 3 books now, and I am in the process of 3 others, and I just kind of want to check in, because I think I'm going to forget by the end of the month. So first off, 1 star. This is coup de grace, and how do I talk about this? I feel like you've learned this by now. I will spoil books I didn't like because I find no inherent reason not to spoil them because I didn't like them, versus if I really enjoy a book, I won't spoil it because I want you to go read it and enjoy it. I gave this a 1. Probably should have DNF'd it because I just didn't care, but I was hoping that something was going to change, that it would get better, and it didn't. We are following Vicken. Vicken has decided that he is done with his life. We have no reason why, really. This is a very short novella. It's only 36 pages. And Vicken is a gay Armenian man, but like that's the only information we have about him, that he like lived with his mom at one point is hinted at, but we don't know any of his circumstances in life. We don't know what his job is. We don't know what has happened. No, he's an EMT. Sorry. We do know he's an EMT. But we don't know why he has reached this point where he has decided he's done with living. And so he has decided he's going to take the train to like the end of the line and like walk into water and drown himself. However, he gets to the last train station and he falls asleep on the bench and wakes up inside essentially purgatory. A purgatory-like place where he can't get out. He is stuck going from room to room, station to station, all within this like train station purgatory. And the implication is that because he wants to take his own life, he wakes up in purgatory. So there is some like religious thought there. My problem lies not with the story, but with the language and the way it was told. I read at the beginning to you all that this deals with depression and suicide and includes scenes with reference to suicidal ideation and depictions of self-harm. That is true. And I would like to add that there is way more than that small little trigger warning implies. And I was talking to my coworker about it, and that's where my problem is. If you're going to have a trigger list at the beginning, it needs to be inclusive and incorporate everything that's in this book. Because ultimately, there was way more than just depression and suicidal ideation in here, along with self-harm. There were graphic depictions of self-harm and an on-page unaliving attempt multiple times, at least 2 scenes of someone trying to unalive themselves. There was descriptions of suicidal ideation, descriptions of like eating disorders or body dysmorphia and body image. There is some sexual content. It's not that big a deal compared to everything else. It's very minor, but it's still in there. There's implication. There is a character that he meets that he never learns her name, and he just calls her Pashmina because of the Pashmina scarf she wears, and that felt inherently racist. Like, you didn't bother to learn her name, so instead you just called her by the headscarf she wore. Like, I believe it was a headscarf, and she is there. The implication for her is that she has cancer and she decided to end her life on her terms, and that's why she's in purgatory. Like, there is a huge disconnect there, in my opinion, of like someone who is depressed and has just given up on life versus someone who is battling a disease that is going to take their life no matter what and has decided, I would like to end on my terms instead of this slow, drawn out process where I am miserable and in pain every single day of my remaining life. And it was not handled gracefully. The language is flowery at times and overly descriptive and metaphorical, and it made no sense. There were entire passages of beautiful language, but I had no idea what this author was trying to say, what that paragraph was about, and ramblings. Like, you're in this person's mind, you're in Viken's head. Like, he is talking direct to us. There is fourth wall breaking. He speaks to us, the reader. He acknowledges that he is writing this down, it's like he is writing this book and you are reading it, and that we are a part of this exchange. But he rambles, and I have no idea if that was intentional or not. I have no clue if they were trying to come across as pretentious and like the sad ramblings of a depressed person. And if that's the case, that's insulting. It just felt weird. And as other people put it as well, like, it almost was self-indulgent and glorifying of self-harm and those things. And I don't agree with that. I have also never read such a gruesome unaliving attempt on page as I have in this book, and that did not prepare me. An on-page attempt is very different than ideation, and I think that needed to be in the trigger warnings. And again, full circle, that's what ultimately bothered me, is you included this trigger warning, so I thought I knew what I was coming into, and it wasn't there. And it was so much more, and that can be so harmful for individuals who are struggling with this, and I think that's unacceptable. I did not like the writing. I didn't like the characters. I didn't know what was going on half of the time, and it was very bloody and gory, and it was just doing too much. So 1 star. I don't recommend. The best thing about this, there was a line in there that I was like, that 100% describes the writing of the book. There is a line that says, "What good is a window if it's dark outside?" And I'm like, that is the best description of like the writing in this book. Like, what good is the writing if you can't make sense of it? What good is a window if it's dark outside? You damned yourself. So no, I don't recommend. I will not be going and getting the final version. I'm not doing it. Whatever. I am unhauling this. I am giving it to my friend who has a little free library, and am letting her do with it as she will. The other part of this update is that I'm also going to unhaul this book, which is The Upside of Unrequited by Becky Albertalli. I believe when I looked this up that this is actually the second book in her like Simon versus the Homo sapiens agenda series, or it's in the same universe. And looking at my bookshelf this year and being realistic, I've talked about how on my bookshelf I have books that I have been gifted. The majority of the things on my bookshelf are books I've never read. And last year I wanted to read from my bookshelves. This year I still want to read from my bookshelves. However, I also wanted to actually look at what I own and be critical and go, do I still want to read this book? Yes or no? And if I still wanted to read it, it gets to stay on the shelf. If I decide I have no more interest in it, I'm not keeping it because it's just taking up stuff on my shelf. I looked at this, and the answer is no. I don't. I am not interested in this. It is a YA novel following Molly, and it's all about her how she's had several crushes but no boyfriends, and her journey. But I believe it's in the same universe as Simon. This particular copy, is from Owlcrate, and so it came with a letter from the author, which is fun, and also a book plate from the author that you could put inside of your copy. It is a sticker. You can, place it in here as a signed copy on like the title page or whatever. That just doesn't seem, I don't know if I will put this in there, but I am going to unhaul this as it is, because it's not necessarily that I'm not interested in YA. I'm currently reading a YA, but it has to grab my attention, and unfortunately I am not interested in just like a YA romance. I'm not interested in like a YA coming of age romance. It's just, I'm not, at least not this one. Because I say that as I recognize I want to read Dante and Aristotle Discover the Secrets of the Universe, which is a coming of age YA romance. I don't want to read this one because I feel like I have to read the first book, which is Simon versus the Homo sapiens agenda, and I don't want to read it just to read this. So I'm unhauling it, and I think I will be giving this to my friend as well. And then last but not least, drink break. This is my morning coffee. With not the sugar aspartame creamer. But a creamer I don't like because it's my husband's creamer. It's fine. Update on Flawed. This is the book about Celestine, who lives in like a dystopian society where you are perfect. The goal is to perfect, and if you make a mistake of some kind, you are branded flawed. And it's literally like you get branded with a giant F. You get branded with that symbol, and you have to go around and wear like a red armband so that everyone knows that you're flawed. This is a very political book. We are following a biracial main character. Her dad works for a like news outlet. He does the newspaper. Her mom is a model. She has an older sister and a younger brother. She got an older sister. And her boyfriend is the son of a judge. And the judge's job is there's a council of judges, and they rule on people. They deem whether or not you are flawed. And their system is highly controlled and highly regulated. And it's basically, if there's any sort of like moral imperfection, you are brought to a jail and you are held in a holding cell until you are put on trial, where the panel of judges then determines whether or not your actions were flawed or like morally bankrupt. And if you are deemed not flawed, then you are like released back into society and everything's fine. But if you are deemed flawed, you get branded. You now have to wear this armband and you are segregated from the rest of the community. This is an allegory, of course, for race and other like political issues, people who are viewed as less than. If you are flawed, you can't work the same jobs. You aren't allowed to be like in the same places. There are in grocery stores, there is a flawed only section where you are allowed to buy your vegetables and your food. You don't get to have the same diet as non-flawed people. You get like bread and rice and like that's it. Like you get the bare basics. You don't get to have like luxuries in life. You're not allowed to speak to not flawed people. On the bus, there are flawed seats that only you can sit there, but perfect people can sit in your seats and it's fine, but you can't sit anywhere else. If you are seen, like there's all these regulations, and so it is very inherently an allegory for race or for segregation, for like apartheid. Our main character is perfect, right? She is very literal. She follows the rules. Everything to her is based off of logic, what she does, and her specifics. She has this horribly annoying habit of if you say something and it's like not quite correct, she will correct you, where she's like, actually, what you meant was this. It's very annoying. Her and her boyfriend have like a gross relationship, in my opinion. Like they're not quite 18. She's almost 18. He gives her like this anklet that is like circles because circles are perfect and it's supposed to represent that she's perfect. And the book opens with them at a dinner party and their neighbors are like the police, but it's not the police. It's just these like the flawed police, which is completely separate from their other criminal system. The flawed police show up to their neighbor's house and like take away the wife and mother of their next door neighbors because she helped her mother end her life. And that is deemed like unacceptable because life is sacred. And that starts our character on this like journey where she starts to question herself and what she knows because, right, her neighbor was her music teacher and they had dinner and her daughter was her best friend. And now she's like, do I not get to talk to my friend anymore? And what does this mean for the family? What happens to her mom? What happens to her dad? What happens to all of these people? If her mom is found flawed, but then her family isn't, like her mom won't be able to be with them, like all of this stuff, right? There's some hints about her grandfather being kind of kooky. Like all this is saying she starts to question herself and question what she's always known, right? Her her boyfriend's dad is one of these judges, and she looks up to him and she's like, oh, he's this great man. He's perfect. He's wonderful. He helps lead us and protect us. But now she's starting to question the system and question, are flawed people actually flawed? Is there anything wrong with them? All of this stuff. And one day she, quote unquote, helps a flawed person, which then gets her like taken in. And we are just now getting to like her like trial, because she did something that is potentially going to be deemed flawed. And now we are going into it where she can either lie and say, I did not help this person, to save her own skin, or she could tell the truth and risk becoming branded herself. It's very interesting. My only issue with it is that I can't help but compare it to the Hunger Games, in the sense that at its core, the Hunger Games was a deeply political story, right? We had the less privileged trying to rise up against the privileged, and we had a girl who was used as the poster child, right? She was the face of the rebellion. Even though she did not mean for it to happen, she became used as the symbol of this rebellion, and they used her image and they used her to push their agenda. And that is being very, very, very heavily shoved down our throats in this book. It is literally on page where people have told her they want to use you. Like, no matter what you do, they're going to use you. Where I don't remember but it is on page where they're like, hey, this side wants to use you to show that, because they're spinning her story in the media. So one side is spinning her story as this perfect girl messed up and she's awful and she helped the flawed, and so now she also must be flawed. We have to uphold our rules and our standards and our moral obligations, so she must be rah rah rah, that even like the mighty can fall because she's the daughter of the newspaper person and the girlfriend of the judge's son, like blah 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 blah, right? Like bad. Versus the other people the other side wants to spin her story as, look, she was trying to help. They're trying to push back against the treatment of the flawed. They're trying to get things to change because they recognize that this is wrong and that it's not okay. And they're trying to use her as an example of, she was doing the right thing and it's going to get her get her punished. The whole thing was that an elderly man who was flawed was on a bus. His seats were taken on the bus, which means he couldn't sit anywhere else. And he started to like choke, like he started to cough, and because he's so old and frail, and he really just needed to sit down, and everyone was ignoring him and she couldn't. And so she went over there and tried to get the people in the flawed seats to move. They didn't want to move, and they were like, are you trying to help him? And she was like, no, of course not, but like, he's coughing and like dying, and I just think you could move because there's plenty of other seats on the bus. And then it starts this whole thing. She ends up like grabbing him, and I think she does like get him to a seat that wasn't a flawed seat, and so then they call on her because she helped him. It's messed up. So again, there's that side that's like, she was trying to do the right thing and she's being punished. The system is itself flawed. It is not perfect, and it needs to be evaluated. And there's undercurrents, right, of corruption and power, like absolute power corrupts absolutely, and all of that, because the judge is like, hey, just say that you were doing this. And she's like, that's a lie. And he's like, I'm not asking you to lie. I would never ask you to lie. I'm asking you to tell this version of the truth, right? And so it's showing you, it's very heavy-handed. It is showing you that like there is corruption there. And I think at the end of the day, it's going to be this fun mix. Fun is loosely. It's going to be this mix of the Hunger Games, like Mockingjay specifically, and like the Divergent series, where we have the people in power are ultimately corrupt, and it's up to our female protagonist, who didn't really want this or didn't mean for this to happen is now going to become the face of some rebellion and is going to have to make some decisions and question her life choices and, I don't know, somehow save the day. It is a duology. I've mentioned that before. There is another book in the system. This one's called Flawed. I believe the other book is called Perfection or Perfect. I don't know if I'm going to read it yet. We will see how I feel at the end of this book. Because right now, this is just very heavy-handed. It is in your face. You cannot misread it. There is no reading between the lines. There is no subtext. It is very clearly a very political book. And that's fine. It is YA. It's just very heavy-handed for me as an adult. I'll check in later.